Hello everyone, welcome back to the Deltarune Undertale newsletter. Bad news, my computer updated and I forgot to check my settings on OBS, so I recorded my reaction to this with no audio. But you know what, that's not the worst thing because this update does not have that much crazy stuff going on in it. So I'm not going to read through it like I usually do because I'm not going to be able to react to it anyway, and I imagine you've already read through it yourself, so there's no real point. I'm just going to touch on the things I find interesting and just sort of go over the whole experience with it this time. So that's the plan. To start, the Ides of May. Also, I thought this was pretty funny. It took me a little bit to pick up on it. I'm like, what the hell are they making? But Asgore is making a Toriel hedge and Undyne's making an Alphys hedge. Very funny. I guess my theory on why Asgore wasn't in the newsletters is just not true. I postulated on one of my videos that the reason that Asgore doesn't show up very much in the newsletters isn't because Toby hates the guy, but rather because he's trying to be a little bit more spoiler safe for people who haven't played Undertale yet. But he's a big feature in this newsletter, so I guess maybe Toby just really doesn't have that much love for Asgore. Or maybe he'll be somehow relevant to Chapter 4, which is what this development update is mostly about, right? So, this little blurb here is about Deltarune, so this is the most interesting thing to me. Chapter 4 development's going better than ever, and we're on track to meet our internal deadline, which I think can tell us a lot. Because the deadline is probably set somewhere around, like, I would say the fall. Whether that be this year's fall or next year's fall, I don't know. But I think given some of the other things that are said here, like, here's the current progress. Okay, cutscenes. Only a few ones left. Some tough ones. Other than that, needs polish. All the attacks are technically done, but trying to improve the flow of the bosses, multiple. Still need to create 10 maps. Depending on the size, that's, like, doesn't sound like that big of a deal. Like, if you think about a map in Deltarune, most of them are just, like, a hallway or a room, you know what I mean? Unless it's like the Cyber City, which I don't think you would leave until the end. That's not that much. Gimmicks, which is basically little mini games like the Teacup Ride, I'm assuming, or like the Punch Out sections in Chapter 2. I'm sure would count as well. What's the other thing I was thinking of? Maybe the stoplight segments in the city, although that's pretty easy to program. Basically stuff that requires specific programming that isn't probably within the actual engine itself. That's a little bit more of a big deal. But Toby is saying it's almost done. And then whatever they decide to put in those 10 maps. So we'll see. All in all, I feel like this is like less than a year of work for sure. I don't know if it's like 6 months of work is the thing. And the other thing you got to keep in mind if we're trying to predict when this is going to come out is that after they're done, it then has to go through all the processes of like getting translated and getting approved for all the systems and all of that. So there's like an extra like 2-month time put onto the end of it. So if the prediction of people, I think, including myself, is right, and the internal date is October, that means they'd have to be done August, somewhere around there. It's never that easy, but Toby doesn't want to put a date out there at this point, which I think is probably smart. I mean, like the stupidest thing in the gaming industry, other than the overall focus on giant games that barely make money, I guess, is and buying and closing studios. Okay, so there's a lot wrong. But one of the things is announcing a game like 5 years before you have any gameplay for it. Or it's even got a chance to be done. And then obviously there'll be delays and stuff because the game development something can pop up at any time and set you back like a month. So I think Toby's smart to do that personally. And I do think that perhaps he's being a little bit pessimistic when he says, like, oh, it's still, quite far. Because I don't think our definitions of quite far and his are the same. Because he's got all this stuff in front of him, and I feel like, because he shadow drops these games, he's thinking, like, I want to drop this game, like, this week if I can. But quite far is, like, a number of months, I think, to Toby. Whereas when I read that, still quite far is, like, 2 more years, which I don't think is true. Anyway, the real thing is that it's weighing on us more and more with each passing month, like the releases. So that, yeah. I don't know about October at this point. I feel weird because, like, part of me is like, October feels right depending on how big these maps are and, like, all these gimmicks, right? Because really, polish is obviously a process, but, like, a month for polish is probably enough, in my opinion. Again, I don't know how big these chapters are, and it is 2 chapters, so I don't know. But I feel like chapter 3 is probably, like, done, because we're not even talking about it anymore. So, if it's just chapter 4, I feel like it's not unrealistic to think maybe October or November could be possible, but I also don't think it's unrealistic to, keep your expectations in line and say, well, maybe it's like a year from now, We'll see. The Papyrus Q&A, okay, this stuff is really funny. But I've already read through it, so now all the jokes are not gonna hit me again, but oh well. This one, not much really to this. It's just Sans and Papyrus being Sans and Papyrus. Most chewable skeletal feature is a very funny question. And if I was, I would contain every ingredient and nutrient. Yeah, it's just funny. And his poor skateboarding tape gets bit by dog. Funny to have a conversation with Flowey, considering this, like, whole newsletter is themed around Papyrus and Flowey. It's kind of weird. Flowery! Yes! Whatever you say, Papayas. What? Who's that? I want to meet them. Yeah, it's pretty funny. And then Sans trolling Papyrus by having him stretch all around the room to be the coolest thing in every place. And then... and standing just out of reach on your rug? Sans! Me? Like, treat you to say I'm cool. Funny. Classic Sans. A Smash Bros thing. This one's pretty funny. He wouldn't even throw a punch. Instead, he'd probably trick someone into wearing a costume that just looks like him. And while they were out doing all the work, sweating and suffering in their grave combat, he would be lounging backstage, chatting it up, eating conspicuously 2-dimensional food. Yeah, that's pretty funny. And as a reward, his impersonator only gets a handshake. However, this is merely a theory of games. This is a game theory. Thanks for watching. Can you shoot lightning bolts, Papaya? Sorry, I think this message is intended for Flowery's friend. Sounds very cool, though. He can fire lightning. Yes. Shiny new cap. Papyrus talks about being named after a font. And look, Mew Mew's here. Silence, Papyrus. I think this implies some sort of, like, friendly relationship between these two. Or Papyrus just thinks that Mew Mew is literally a cat. Like, just like a house cat that's wandered in. I can't tell. I saw a tweet before this came out that was like, if there's any Papyrus and Mew Mew interactions in this newsletter, I will do, like, a drawing for everybody who likes this tweet. And I was like, it's not impossible. I should like that. And then I didn't. So, No drawing for me, but that poor person. I mean, good for them, I guess, because it's what they wanted to see, but hey. What's a circus? Clown. You are a clown! The place you work is the circus! And you sleep on the big bouncy ball at the back of the tent. Also, you have been caged for being too annoying. I get it. Are you gonna read the question or not? I'm getting to that. It's kind of funny, because... sounds a lot like Jevil. Papyrus Knight hint? Except he's talking about Sans in this situation, so who knows? You win $1 million, but you have to write in cursive for the rest of your life. Papyrus is saying, oh, speaking in being associated with a font would be terrible. I can't even imagine. Everyone might start calling me cursive. And then Sans. Sans. Where did you get that expensive hat? I don't know. He just does it. Very funny. Not a lot of, like, things to break down there other than Papyrus Knight. Anyway. Flowey getting some plant food. Yum! A song with a VTuber, which sounds like Toby enjoyed doing that, so that's nice. And then the whole resonated with me hopes and dreams thing. You could take that as a hint of something. Of, like, the things you wanted to achieve are floating away from you in the sky, and while you lie there falling in a crater, your wing torn off, never to grow back, bitterness grows. You feel like you may never leave the ground again, but it's not true. You can still fly. Maybe there's something there. Honestly, you could read that being about Spampton. You could read that being about Chris or Des or just anybody. It's almost like it's meant to be just inspirational widely. So, yeah. Anyway. This and more Mew Mew. Something's going on, I'm telling you. And conclusion. Sans. Sans! I don't want anyone to burn out waiting for this, but we haven't burned out yet. Actually, it's the opposite. We're on fire a lot. Ouch! It's funny. And then another Papyrus Mew Mew interaction. Oh my gosh, I have to make 2 drawings for everyone. Flowey looks jealous. It's funny. So what is up with these flowers? It's like the only thing I can latch onto here. I think the theme in general is like gardening or just like, growing plants, which is interesting because this newsletter is the first one to be exclusively about Chapter 4, which makes it feel like Chapter 4 could be related to Asgore and the flower shop. Because, I mean, these flowers are in his shop. There's the double doors. We've been speculating for a while. And it would make sense if the church was Chapter 5's Dark World. So that would kind of, because originally this was going to be a package of Chapter 3, 4, and 5. And we know Chapter 3 is more of a character-driven rather than plot-driven chapter, according to Toby. Which means Chapter 4 probably wasn't intended originally to be like the big cliffhanger to leave us off on before 6 and 7, which means that's probably Chapter 5. So I could definitely see the church, like Rudy dying or something in Chapter 5, as being a bigger deal. And then Chapter 4 being Asgore is like maybe the most logical place to fit that in. I think the only other place you could maybe do it is like Chapter 6, and it's about like Azrael as well, but I don't know. So maybe that's what this whole theming is about. But I'm interested why it's these 4 flowers specifically with Flowey, of course. Because obviously we're missing like a bunch of them, right? There's like 4 more flowers technically. I mean, I guess there's the golden flower, which Flowey already kind of represents, so that makes sense as to why he's not, or why that one's not here. But what about the, oh no, the green flower, or the, not red. What's the other one? I'm forgetting the Undertale soul colors. Maybe it's why am I forgetting? Oh, right, there's yellow and gold. That's why I'm getting confused. Yeah, so yellow, green, and then gold, right. So we're missing yellow and green, which, you know, yellow I feel like is the most related to well, okay, there's a lot of things you can do. Okay, so yellow is justice, right? And Susie has the yellow soul on her belt in the Dark World, which is interesting. I've talked about that before. So that could be a hint to something that the yellow flower isn't here. Or the yellow flower also relates to, like, Alphys and Metaton, because that's where you get that power in Undertale. So it could be something about that. It's interesting, though, that the green flower would also be missing then, because perhaps, because technically the golden flower is missing too, this is telling us something about the secret boss thing, right? Where we've used the yellow soul power with Spamton, and we've used the red soul power with Jevil, and we assumed that we'd be using either green or magenta with the Chapter 3 secret boss. So if this is Chapter 4 themed, and those three are missing, that might confirm that it is the green flower for Chapter 3, which I think was most people's initial assumption. But I did think it was possible it could be the magenta soul. But we'll see what happens with that. So that's interesting. That may be something you could read into with these flowers. The other interesting thing about these flowers is that the magenta soul and the cyan soul flower, like these colors, match up really well to Chris and Susie, right? And Flowey and Ralsei have been compared a lot as being, like, not Asriel's and also having, like, no soul, probably. I mean, all the Darkeners are kind of like Flowey if we assume how the Dark Fountains work is true, which is that human or monster, I guess, person with determination, hits the ground with a weapon, and then that determination brings everything in the room to life. It's essentially the same thing as Flowey being injected with determination and being like a soulless being, right? It feels very similar. So maybe maybe this is some sort of hint about Chapter 4 or 3, I don't know, where Susie's the magenta soul or flower, Chris is the cyan flower, Ralsei is Flowey in this case, and then we have orange and blue to try to figure out. Now, blue, just like soul trait wise, is intelligence, and orange is bravery. However, the other ones were just color matching, if this is correct, so I don't think that's a big deal. The problem is I can't think of anyone orange except arguably Papyrus, but he's also here watering the flowers, which is probably nothing, but who knows. People say, like, Papyrus's stuff is orange, which I don't really buy, but it could be something. Actually, oh my gosh, maybe I've got something here. Give me a sec. Okay, I was wrong, but am I? Let's talk about this. This is one of Half-Bred Chaos's thumbnails about the topic of these weirdly conspicuous shadows in Queen's Mansion, when you do that puzzle where you just stack them all on top of each other. It seems like some of these, like, I can kind of understand now that I've read some Homestuck. Every time I record, somebody's decides to say something on Discord, even though every time I'm not recording, nobody does. Okay. Anyway, these might relate to Homestuck, but I get the wave maybe, and the sun for sure. The house does make sense. The bird? I'm not so sure about the bird. And then the boot, or whatever the hell this thing is, it looks like a boot to me, okay? Or cloud, maybe. Cloud would make more sense for Homestuck, but it doesn't really look like a cloud. At least not one from that art style. So if it is actually meant to be some sort of foreshadowing thing, this could be interesting, because obviously Magenta and Susie are kind of tied together. Green and Ralsei may be kind of tied together. Yellow and Noelle, perhaps, I guess. And then we've got nobody who really represents orange yet in the main cast. And then the light blue for either Birdley or Chris. And interestingly, we have magenta, we have light blue, we have orange, but then we have a dark blue, or just blue, and Flowey. So you could maybe read into that and say that Ralsei won't be in this chapter? Maybe? And that whatever orange character is supposedly being referenced by this thing is going to be part of chapter 4? Maybe? I mean, it's a stretch, but it's something. Because I can't think of any character whose main color is orange in Undertale. Or Deltarune. Other than, like, like, a character that's relevant. Because, like, it's not going to be Grilby. I mean, there's a lot of orange on Monster Team. Just talked about them probably not being important. Because, like, green would be Jockington. Like, that magenta pink could be Caddy, I guess. It's just conspicuous that there is specifically these 4 colors chosen. And none of the others. I think maybe it is meant to be a hint about the secret bosses. Perhaps. And that's it. Which would be very funny. If okay, there's 7 chapters, right? 7 soul colors, but then there's like an extra secret boss that's just Flowey. I mean, I guess you could take it as a hint that the bouquet is going to be the secret boss of chapter 3 too, but that doesn't feel quite as strong to me, because you'd think it would be all the flowers then. Why these 4 specific ones? I'd be interested to hear your theories about that in the comments. Because it feels intentional, right? It's gotta be. I don't know. Or else, like, why not change up the flowers every time? You know? Maybe it's meant to represent... Like, okay, the magenta is Toriel. The light blue is Sans. The orange is Alphys, I guess. And then the blue is Undyne, and it's meant to represent Papyrus's friends. I don't think that works either. I don't know. Anyway, those are my major thoughts on the newsletter. It's pretty chill. Definitely what I would say is mini in comparison to some of the other ones we've gotten. But at the same time, gives us a lot to think about for a little while anyway. So